Now I'm going to talk about modern colors for printing, starting with pigments. Pigments are insoluble particles that are held onto the fiber by a binding agent, such as butadiene or acrylate. It also contains a catalyst that activates the binder if not activated by heat. It is printable on almost all fiber qualities. The application is quick, simple and economical, but the hand feel gets stiff due to the binding agent. It's also a risk that the print cracks and fades. The print is on top of the face of the fabric, but doesn't penetrate totally to the reverse. Opacifiers are used in the paste to create good coverage and can create selected lustres from dull to glossy, pearlescent or metallic. Thickeners are used to create dark shades and prevent colors from bleeding into each other. Other additives that might be used are anti-bleeding agents, thinners, retardants that slow the drying procedure to keep the screen open, dyers to speed up the drying, and softener to keep the color flexible when dried. As the pigments doesn't react with the fiber and stays at the surface, they are easy to match. This opposite to reactive dyes that change color or shade when reacting with the fibers. Anyhow, some of the additives in the pigment dyes might change the shades of the pigment color slightly. Pigment paste is widely used, but not suggested for surfaces particularly exposed to abrasion like trousers. Dyes are complex organic compounds that bind with the material. They need to be dissolved in water or other solvent to penetrate in the fiber. The molecules consist of two parts, the chromophore and the auxochrome. The chromophore part of the molecule is the actual color. The auxochrome makes it soluble and slightly alters the color. A small amount of dye occurs for a large amount of fabric. The color strength of dye is great, but if undissolved particles of dye remain out of the fiber, this might bleed onto other materials. Dyes for printing are used as paste and can be distinguished from pigments as they penetrate more to the reverse of the fabric, especially between the yarns. Reactive dyes are colored compounds capable of forming a covalent bond between the dye molecule and the fiber. Reactive dyes is mostly used for printing on cellulosic fibers, but it's also possible to use on wool and silk. It can also be used on polyamide and polyester, but applied under a weak acid condition. The colors are bright, easy to apply, and the color fastness and light fastness is good. Reactive dye can be made as bifunctional dye stuff that fixes better into the fibers. Reactive colors connect chemically with the cellulosic fibers and in an alkaline environment. The alkaline used is sodium bicarbonate, and the thickening agent is sodium alginate deriving from seaweed. The color generally gets fixed by steaming. Wet colors are insoluble in water and are made soluble by reduction with sodium dihydronate or hydrosulfate. When penetrated in the fiber, it's transformed to oxidized form and is insoluble in water. Caustic soda and sodium hydrosulfate is used in the process. Wet dye is primarily used for cottons or cotton polyester blend. It has an incomplete color range. The original wet dye is indigo, which is used for denim. Dispersed dyes are developed for acetates and synthetic materials and are mainly used for polyester. Dispersed dyes are used for heat transfer printing. The dye enters in the fibers at high temperatures by adding hot air, hot vapor, or passing heated rolls. The molecular weight of the dispersed dyes are low and needs to be non-ionic to be stable. Dispersed dyes are used for sublimation print. The dye's resistance to light and wash is fair. The dispersed colors have a wide color range and are toxic in water. Acid dyes or anionic dyes are used for printing wool, silk and nylon. The acid dyes contain functional groups of sulfonic or carboxylic salt. The acid solution makes the dye enter in the fibers. It can be used only on fibers that create positive charge by the acids. There are 3 classes of acid dyes. Leveling acid dyes that have the moderate fastness and color evenly in highly acids. Milling dyes have better wash fastness but less brilliant colors. These are printed in diluted acids. And finally, acid milling that have larger molecules, high wet and light fastness, more uneven color. Acid milling is often used on wool. The acid colors are not as toxic as the name might sound, even though some of them are. Metal complex dyes are also called pre-metallized dyes. These are developed to be more ambient friendly and easier to use than the chrome dyes. The metal complex dyes have low water solubility. There are 2 main groups of metal complex dyes, 1,1 that are made soluble by strong acid and 1,2 that are made soluble by weak acids. Most are of monoacer type and derive from metals that are complexed. Metal complex dyes are used to print on silk. The thickeners are high molecular biopolymers like different kinds of gum. The dye is fixed, drying followed by steaming. A disadvantage of the color group is the lack of clear color shades. A Surdic dye is created by 2 uncolored compounds. The acid function is bound to an aromatic ring and can be broken down to arylamine, an aromatic amine. Originally, the compounds were added in 2 steps. First the naphtol, a process called premiere, and then the diazo salt that developed the color. Now both are mixed in the paste. The light and wash fastness are excellent. The color range is complete and the cost is moderate. Azodic dyes are primarily used on cotton and also some polyester. Azo dyes may be toxic and some of them are prohibited for some uses in Europe. Basic dyes is a cationic dye. This means that the color carrier ion in the dye salt is positively charged, and these are attracted by the negatively charged ions in the fiber. Basic dye is mainly used on acrylic fibers as Orlon, Drallon and Acrylan. The basic colors give very clear, almost neon color shades. It's also used for discharge print on cotton. Sulfur dyes are the most commonly used dyes for dark cottons. They have good color fastness and are easy to apply. The black is made by a reaction between dinitrophenol and sodium sulfide in hot water. It's also used as coating on cotton, but not common in print pastes.